What's up, viewer? One idea ahead here. I've got a selection of everyday carry knives in front of you, and you might be wondering, how is this an everyday carry knife? Well, to figure out what's right for me is not right for you. So to figure out which ones you might consider and maybe making a purchase for someone else or yourself, or maybe you're thinking about changing what you have up now, what are those considerations you're making? Well, let's start off by classifying what is an everyday carry knife, or an EDC knife. Well, there's three major uses that I see in knives. One is camping, one is a utility knife, and then one, like I said, is everyday carry. That is a fourth category, which is defensive. However, I feel that can fall in the roles of the other three pretty well. Now, with camping knives, generally speaking, you want it to be able to baton through wood, so you have a thick spine, fairly large blade, but there's no way you're going to carry this around with you every day to work and back. Now, maybe you have a job where you work in the outdoors and you can do that, fine, but I'm speaking to the average Joe here. That's probably not going to be the case. Now, with size, you got to consider, what do you need this blade to do? Well, generally speaking, if you have a blade that's going to be 3 inches, you're going to be able to do a lot of cutting tasks that are pretty much going to be covered under that use of the knife. So I restrict my knives no more than 3.5 inches, which all these fall under, and that's generally the size that I'm looking for in an everyday carry knife. For you, it could be different. Remember, let's keep going. Weight. Well, because it's going to be with us every day, we don't want something that's going to be super heavy. We want something that's going to be lightweight, as light as possible, without, taking away from strength or the use of the knife, and still be safe. So with that, you have a couple considerations. What is the blade handle material going to be? Is it going to be metal? Is it going to be, plastic with some metal liners? Or is it going to be all plastic? Make your decision. However, all have their strengths and weaknesses, but if we want to narrow it down on weight, something like this, which is, even though it's a combination, those liners are very heavy. That blade is fairly thick, and I can tell you this is a fairly hefty knife for its blade length. So that's going to be out of the question. You want something as light as possible. I try to keep it under 3 ounces, but there's a couple here that are more than that, but I'll leave them here for the time being, and I'll explain why later. Cost. How much do you want to spend on that knife? Well, quite frankly, I would rather not spend more than about $30, $35 on one. And here's the reason. If it falls out of your pocket, you're now out your pocket knife. If you had a $150 knife, it's gone. You're not going to be having it anytime soon. Maybe if someone returns it, but that's probably not going to be the possibility. So we want to try to limit it to an affordable knife. That doesn't mean it has to be cheap by any means, but there's a certain quality you might not be able to attain if you set a price limit, like I said, around $30, $35. So keep in mind, every day is not the day like it was before, and you could lose that knife, so keep that in mind. Now, types of blades. You've gotten this far with me. Let's talk about what kind of blades there are. Now, I'm not talking about, oh, see, that's terrible. I'm not talking about the shape of it. I'm talking about the cutting surface. As you can see, this is a partially serrated blade. There are full serrated blades, and give me an example. See, I'm doing terrible. Plain edge. So which one do you want? Well, quite frankly, I choose a plain edge for a couple reasons. One, that's easy to sharpen. I can use this little sharpener that's been chilling here the whole time, and I can sharpen that blade. How is this going to sharpen serrated blades? It's not. So that's out of the question for me. Now, another use, you might say, well, I need to cut a lot of rope. Well, great, use a serrated blade. But for my everyday tasks, I'm not cutting rope, I'm not cutting cloth. Plain edge will suit me fine. Now, what kind of material are we going to have with this blade? Is it going to be, super nice? Is it going to be like maybe an AUS 8, middle of the road? Is it going to be 8 CR 13 MOV? Kershaw's famous for that. Is it going to be a 440 carbon steel, 420? Is it going to be a mystery stainless steel? Well, to be honest, if you're spending about $35, you can still get a decent quality steel for that money, for that price point. So having said that, you're probably going to be stuck though with what you get based on the knife. So let's take an example. Here's a stainless blade. Here's a high carbon steel blade. I forget the particulars on Opinel, but both of these knives are about, well, this is actually probably under $10, but I had to pay close to $15 to get it shipped and so on. And this as well was about $15. Now the idea behind them is if you want a blade that is not going to rust up on you, go stainless. However, consider this. High carbon steel is going to be much easier to sharpen and it will hold an edge much longer. So, you know, what do you do there? This actually has a little bit of rust pitting on it, and I have actually tried to keep this oiled pretty well. So, you know, they still can rust up on you no matter what kind of care you take. So, there's a third option. Coating. Look at this rainbow finish on this Kershaw Leek. You know, while it's not a stainless steel, it's still a high carbon steel. They put a finish on it so it won't rust up on you. Sure, that cutting surface will rust, but the whole blade itself might not. So, what material are you going to use? Well, like I said, I prefer a high carbon. I don't like having something that's hard to sharpen, or sorry, that's too soft that I have to sharpen frequently. I'd rather have something that's a little bit better steel. So let's get rid of a couple of these that aren't in that category. Alright, now, there's a decorative style called Damascus. What they do is they layer upon layer upon layer to get this look. Now this might not be a good way to go because most cheap knives will not disclose what kind of steel they use. So that's going to be out of the question. We want something that's known. It's going to be good for the money we're spending on it. Even though not a whole lot, we still want the best that we can be. So, folding or fixed blade? Ultimate question. Well, you have, with a fixed blade, while this is not a full tang, the metal stops about here. You do, generally speaking, will have a full tang knife where the strength allows it to, thrash on whatever you're cutting and not break. Whereas a folding mechanism, the strength of that knife relies on its locking mechanism. That ability for that blade not to go anywhere. So that's a decision you're going to have to make, but generally speaking, for the cutting task we're going to need, fixed blade, it's not really necessary. Now, if we already have taken out fixed blades, what kind of locking mechanism do we need in it? Well, take like this balisong. I'm not going to try to impress you guys and open it correctly, but this, that's not going anywhere. Sure, it's a cheap one, but honestly, that's as solid as a rock. Or are we going to take something like this, where we have an Opinel knife, where it folds open, you look at that, you twist it, and you can see how that little bit there locks it in place. Now that's not going anywhere. That's a different type of locking mechanism. It might be like the SOG Flash 1, where there's an internal catch in there. It might be a lock back design, which I'm struggling to see at the moment. There's a lock back design somewhere in here. There we go. Took it away. Where you have a little lever in the back. Or it might have, I'm doing terrible, a liner lock, which is a metal liner inside the handle material which slips open and locks the blade in place. Which one's right for you? Which one's the strongest? Which one, or, sorry, forgive me, one more. Well, I don't really have an example, but let's say there wasn't one at all. Maybe it's, well, actually I do. Here we go. Let's say there's no lock at all. This one, it doesn't lock in place. It's just there. Well, if you can choose a locking blade, but you should always be considerate of how you're using that blade and always cutting away from you and never cutting towards you and always pushing the surface that the blade has cutting material. Don't try and pry back on it, because even a locking mechanism can fail. Even a fixed blade, well, no, won't go that far, but you want to be careful of how you use your knife, and if you can get a locking blade, maybe add a little bit of security to it of how you use it, I would go with that option. Now, finally, method of carry. Alright, this is important. Now, you could have a neck knife like this, where it's going to hang on your neck and you just pull it out and use it when you need it, or you can have a pocket clip, such as this one, or you can have a sheath or a patch of some sort, or you can have what I like to call deep care, which is just literally in your pocket. And I like to attach a lanyard if I'm going to do that. So if it's in my keys, I can feel around for that lanyard, and grab it out of my pocket when I need to. So that all depends on how your dress and attire is. And what do I mean by that? Well, if I'm just wearing jeans going to class, it's not going to make a difference. I could have something like this, a Kershaw Oh So Sweet, where that's going to be exposed out of my pocket. That's not really going to make a big deal. No one's really looking around for what I'm wearing. Again, I could have this Kershaw leak, and that's fairly reflective surface, the rainbow finish, and that's going to be sticking out of my pocket. Do I want that? Well, that all depends. If you're wearing dress pants, however, and you're going for like an interview or something, you want the most discreet, carry possible. And I don't necessarily like it being in my pocket because it gets beat up more, and it's also harder to find. And if you want your knife, you want to be able to use it. So having something like a deep carry pocket knife, look how deep that is. That's the only thing showing is the clip itself on this knife. This is the SOG Flash 1. And you still got a decent knife to it. Well, you also have another one, Buck Vantage. That's also extremely deep carry. Nothing's exposed, nothing on the top of the knife. Now we come over here, again, what do you want? What level of visibility of that knife do you want to have? Sure, by having an exposed top, you can grab it, and it might be a little easier to carry. But then again, everyone in the world can see you have a knife. So I'll leave that one up to you. Now finally, if you want to carry maybe a backup utility knife, this one's fairly heavy, the Gerber, or maybe a backup keychain knife, or even the Pocket Widgie Bar, or the Micro Mini, whatever this one's called, from CountyCom. Put in your keychains. I use this to open up boxes. The reason? It won't dull my blade out, and that does everything fine. So you might also have a backup on a multi-tool. The blade's in there. You might use that as your only knife. However, what happens when just your blade goes bad but everything else on it's still good to go? Well, you can't replace those blades. Even if you could, do they make them? Can you find them? So how's it going to be when you wear that blade down? It maybe breaks. Now you've kind of defeated the purpose of that multi-tool. So with that, I'm just going to leave you with those slots. Maybe it'll help you decide which one you want. I personally been looking at this whole time these three: the Buck Vantage, SOG Flash 1, and the Kershaw Leak. Now this is another Kershaw Leak. This was about $30. This was actually almost $70 for that rainbow finish. I know, it was a waste of money, but I like it. I just can't explain it. I like it. But you can still get something that might be a little less, has an assisted opener, but this is a more delicate knife. Look at that tip. See how delicate it is? Now we come here to the Buck Vantage. Look at that tip. You're probably going to break that if you try to pry something. So I also consider where I'm going to be using that knife that day. But they have one thing in common. I carry them with me every single day. Whether it be just the SOG Flash 1, Kershaw Leak, or the Buck Vantage. You decide. But make sure, whatever it is, you have it with you. Thank you. Until next video, stay safe.